All right, what is good, ladies and gentlemen, is the Master Reviewer back again with another review, and tonight we are doing a review for BFB, aka Battle for BFDI, and then the second half of the season, Battle for BFB. Yeah, this is a kind of as usual, this is a pretty confusing, not confusing, but just like a very hectic season with a lot of stuff going on, so I will do my best to explain the plot. And this is the first time watch for me. I've never seen this before. So yeah, let us just get into it, starting off with the plot. Yeah, so basically, I'm going to explain this a bit out of order in terms of like when we get certain information. But there is this super fan of BFDI 4, and he has a friend X, and he ends up arriving to the scene of all the contestants of BFDIA. There's also a bunch of new contestants that were previously in the locker of losers from BFDIA, and they're now free. I'm assuming that we'll see them get freed in IDFB whenever that starts airing again. So yeah, so now all of them, 4 basically offers them, you can compete for BFDI itself, which is basically, we find out at the end what it actually is, which is the video archive of the entire first and second season, aka BFDI and BFDIA. So that is what everyone is competing for this season. And then halfway through the series itself, it's like, yeah, part A of BFB, I'll just call it BFB because it stands for Battle for BFDI and Battle for BFB. So, yeah. The first half is basically they are competing for BFDI, but then halfway this other character 2 arrives and then basically offers them his powers. He has like apparently a lot of powers and stuff. So he offers it to the contestants, and so like a lot of the contestants ends up leaving to join 2's game show, which is going to be BFDI, The Power of 2, which is currently still airing, so that will be one of the future reviews I get to. So yeah. And so there are still there's 14 contestants that are still in 4's BFB. So that is what the second half of the series is about. And then I'm going to get to spoilers now. So the ending is basically the final 2 contestants are Flower and Gelatin. And once again, the announcer box from BFDI, he ends up showing up. And once again, he wastes the entire budget of the series, and then he says we're canceling the show because we don't have the budget. And so there's a telethon that goes on with Purple Face, who is back once again. So yeah, it culminates in basically, I think Flower, she actually ends up winning. She gets the most votes, but so she wants BFDI as well as the announcer box. He wants BFDI because it's his creation. Purple Face wants BFDI because he felt underappreciated in the last few episodes of the series. And it culminates in basically, I think Flower, she actually goes through a lot of good character development, where in the original BFDI she was the most hated character. So by the end of this series, she is she's a completely different character. She actually has a lot of friends, and she gives up the prize of winning BFDI. And I saw a comment in the video, the final episode, where someone said at the end of BFDI, it's she was killing everyone, destroying all the recovery centers, but in the end of BFB, she's happy, she has friends, and it's it all ends well. So yeah, it's very nice to see her character development in the series. And yeah, so the plot overall, there's also towards the end, there's 4, he felt very unappreciated throughout the entire series, and so the ending also involves the characters basically trying to get him back because he ended up leaving, so they want to get him back basically. So yeah, a lot of stuff that goes on in the plot this series, but I maybe didn't do the best job of recapping it, but overall I'm going to give the plot, I would say probably I'm thinking between a 3 to a 4 out of 5. I would say I'm going to probably give it I'm going to go with 3 to 5. I don't think it's as good as BFDI or BFDIA. All these seasons, I guess you could call them, they all feel very different from each other, where it's the original felt the most game show like that, actually well-structured game show. The second one just felt really random, where it's just very much being held together by loose threads, where they didn't have announcers, and they were kind of the teams were constantly switching and stuff. It felt very random, and the BFDIA felt the most just anything could happen at any moment, where this series feels a bit of a combination of the both, where it does feel it has some structure with 4 himself being the host, and it feels we're going a bit back to the game show format, but we're still we got a lot of random craziness going on, where it's just 4 will come up with challenges on the spot of what the challenge of the episode is going to be, as well as what else there is. Yeah, the challenges themselves, they're still kind of more wacky, on the wackier side of things compared to the original BFDI, where it was just solve a puzzle climb a ladder, stuff like that. So yeah, I would say that it's like a nice combination of the first 2 seasons where it does still feel like we got a lot of like random chaotic elements, but it feels a bit more structured, I would say. But even so, it does feel, here I'll say this, the halfway point where it does become battle for BFB, it does, like, it kind of undercuts everything that happened beforehand, because all the previously eliminated contestants that were eliminated that end up deciding to stay with 4, they just end up coming back. So it does feel like we did just kind of waste the first half of the series just like kind of, I guess introducing the characters and stuff, but it does very much feel like the first half of the series just doesn't amount to anything, because all the previously eliminated contestants that just choose to stay with 4, they end up just, yeah, like I'm pretty sure that's the case, because Loser, he was a character that was eliminated in like the first half of the season, but then in the second half he just returns. So yeah, it does feel like the first half is just not as good as the second half, which it actually feels like an actual competition. I guess it makes sense. Like they start out the original season with 50 contestants, I'm pretty sure, so they did have to cut the numbers down. So I'm sure the reason that part of the reason why they did the whole like series split was so that just the series wouldn't just go on forever with all the characters. Like I'm sure they thought that, okay, this cast of characters is too big, so we need to cut it down. So they just split into 2 separate series. So anyway, overall, I would give the plot a 3 out of 5. I thought it was all right. I would say probably not as good as BFDI or BFDIA, but even so, like they still do a fantastic job. I said this was my favorite thing about BFDIA, and honestly, it's still probably, it might be my favorite thing. Well, when we get to the best score category, it might end up being my favorite thing again, which is the fact that they're able to take all these small details that were mentioned like years ago, and then they're still able to utilize it in such an effective way. And like the character developments, it's like we finally actually got like a conclusion to the whole Fiery Leafy conflict that was going on, where finally Leafy does end up apologizing to Fiery, which was honestly, it felt like that was never going to happen. So the fact that like I finally got to see that conclusion, like that kind of rivalry wrap up, and so them like finally, Leafy basically finally apologizing to Fiery, and yeah, by the end of the series they're going off to find their own Dream Island. I thought that was a pretty good conclusion. The whole stuff with Flower where she ends up like actually becoming a better person, I thought that was also good. So yeah, overall the plot, it's still, I would say, I'm being kind of harsh, but I'm still just going to give it a 3 out of 5, I would say. In terms of the characters, so once again, at the beginning of the series, we're introduced to all these new characters, which we don't really have, like we just haven't really seen before, and so it is not great, I'll be honest. Like at the start, it does feel very much like there's way too many contestants. It's like we have all the original contestants, plus like a lot of new ones that were in the locker of losers in BFDIA. So it very much feels overcrowded with the amount of characters there are. But then when you get into the second half of the series, basically the only new characters that are left are Taco, Lollipop, who else? Loser, Balloon. I think that there's maybe a few others, but it like the pool of new characters gets a lot smaller, where I can finally start like remembering certain personality types of characters, like Taco being the more serious one, Lollipop being very much the contrarian, Balloon got eliminated early on, so it's hard to remember him really, like anything he did. Loser being like the one that everyone likes, and yeah, but I guess that's not the case for the viewers, because he ends up getting voted out, like he got voted out twice, like pretty early on. So yeah, overall the characters, I would say, and there is still like a lot of the old characters that we have. Once again, in the first half, it does feel a bit overcrowded with the amount of characters, but when you get into the second half, when it like a lot of them do end up going off to Teapot, so it will be cool to see them probably in that series when I do get to that. But in this case, like we still have, there's Fiery, Leafy, like they're some of my favorite characters, so it's cool to see them still. Flower, I said her development is great. Gelatin, I think that he is still good. Who else is there? They're like still all the characters that were in BFDIA, it's cool to see them once again, I would say. For himself, I thought, so here's the thing, 4 and X at the beginning, I did not like their characters at all. I found them like really annoying. They really grew on me. Honestly, by the end of the series, they became some of my favorite characters, I would say. At first I thought like, oh, this gimmick, it's like kind of annoying, of like these very chaotic hosts of the series. Like it's like a very much a whiplash from the announcer, who was like very structured. So, but I do think that he did definitely grow on me, and he became honestly like one of my favorite characters in the series. So yeah, 4 and X are great, I would say. Besides them, the announcer returning was actually a surprise. I was not expecting him to return, and the fact that we even got like certain, that once again, like they're utilizing certain details, like the fact that I think at the start of BFDIA, I think it was Blocky, or it was either Blocky or Eraser. I think it actually might have been Eraser, but Eraser, he just like the paper just smacked into his face of like the rules of BFDIA, like what to do and stuff, and like they explain like how the wheel of contest like just showed up out of nowhere. Like we actually finally get like answers to that, of like how the announcer himself was actually there the whole time, like setting it up and making sure that it stayed structured. He was the one that made the puffball announcer speaker thing. So yeah, it's cool that we got like some some more just like they're utilizing more details from the past, and they're like giving answers that just really good writing, I would say. And yeah, so overall the characters, I would give probably a, I don't know, I'll give it like a 6.5. We do good characters. We do not get to see as like just there are certain characters that just like leave halfway through that are in Teapot that it, would have been nice to see some of them, but the characters that we're left with, I still think they are good. So overall, I'm going to give a 6.5. That might honestly be a bit harsh, but we're just going to give it a 6.5. In terms of these settings, so it's a different setting this time around. I think most of the challenges, at first I'm not sure where it is, but then at a certain point they end up in, like in the second half of the series, they end up in the Pillars of Ruin, something like that, some area that it's pretty nice, I would say. I do like it. It's not as good as BFDI or BFDIA. I still think BFDIA has probably so far the best settings in the entire series. This one, it feels a lot more, I don't know, less like colorful, less like, I'm not going to say creative, but maybe a bit more generic, I would say. There's like a desert area that they're in as well. So it doesn't feel as like creative and kind of in line with I don't know, it did like the areas in BFDIA, they felt very much like, oh yeah, this feels like a BFDI area, whereas these felt like, it does feel like definitely a different series, like with the settings that we have here. It feels a bit more like thought out, I want to say, maybe. So yeah, I don't know, it's good settings, but it's not as good as the previous seasons. I still feel like there's also like the original BFDI setting, which was just like the large open field area that they would compete in. That one was also, I would still say, probably a bit better than this one, but this one is still fine. I would still give this one, like the settings, I'd give probably I'll go like a 5.5. It's decent settings. It's not anything great, but I still, it worked, I would say. In terms of the visuals, so this was an interesting aspect because in this series, we actually did get an art style change, which was very interesting to see, whereas the first two series was very, I keep like using series and seasons intertwined, but just know if I'm saying series or seasons, it's just referring to like BFDI or BFDIA, like either one. So you can call them a different series as a whole, or you just like they're more just like different seasons. So yeah, in the earlier seasons, it was a lot more, I don't really know how to describe it, but it was a lot more, less like drawn, whereas this season it does feel like a lot more like the characters feel more drawn out, like with pencils, so it feels a lot more, I don't know, artistic, I guess you could say artistic, like very much more, like it feels like it was more, I don't know, pencil drawn kind of art style in this season, whereas in the previous ones it felt a lot more, I want to say computer like created, where it was made with like, yeah, like on a computer or something like that. I don't know how to describe this. I'm not an expert when it comes to artistic styles and stuff, but yeah, I do think that the visuals, I don't like it as much as the original ones. I still think I'm more kind of, I think it's probably just some nostalgia bias. I just kind of like grew up with the original ones, I think. So I think that the original art style is a bit better, I would say, but I definitely still like this one. I still think it works. It does look very nice, I would say. Overall, I would give the visuals, there's also still like the movements and stuff, in the way that the character movements, it doesn't feel as fluid as BFDIA, but that's probably because even this series came out about like, I think 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago. I think the earliest one, the first episode of BFB, it may have come out like 9 years ago, I'm pretty sure, actually, so I'm not sure. So it does have a bit of a disadvantage of it being kind of dated compared to the more recent BFDIA episodes that released, which are a lot more modern, so they do look a lot more fluid and stuff. So I'm going to give the visuals probably I'll go like a 7 out of 10. I'm going to say pretty good visuals, and yeah, it still looks like it's still very nice for a indie animation series. Yep. In terms of the comedy, I don't know if I rated it the last two reviews. I don't know if I rated it in the comedy aspect, but I do want to rate this one because I do find this one, like, it was pretty funny. I would say, like, I do like a lot of Four's lines, a lot of X's lines. Once again, they did grow on me with time, so I did like them. And yeah, a lot of the comedy just stems from them, honestly. And I would give them I'd give the comedy like I'll go like a 7 out of 10. I would say pretty good comedy because, yeah, there was definitely some good jokes here and there, some laugh out loud moments, definitely. So in terms of the worst thing, I would say that the worst thing was probably just like the fact that, once again, the first half of the season just kind of amounts to nothing, because halfway they just kind of reset it with less characters. So the first half of the season, I would say it was still fine, but again, like there was way too many characters, and it ultimately didn't amount to a lot. So I'm going to give the first half of the season, like, it wasn't bad, but I'm just gonna give it like a 5 out of 10. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it either, so we're just gonna go 5 out of 10. In terms of the best thing, I would say the best thing is just, once again, like, their ability to the character development and the fact that they're able to utilize details that came out from like years ago. Like I think at this point, maybe no, even so, like the final episodes still came out about, I think, 6 years ago. So the fact that like 6 years ago they were taking details that came out like way earlier on from stuff that came out like even, I don't know, like more than 3 years ago from the time that the final episode of BFB released. So the fact that they're able to still utilize the details of like previous events that happened in a way that I recently checked like the actual release order of like all the BFDI episodes basically from like every single season, and it's really confusing. It's like apparently BFDI get released completely, then the first like 5 episodes of like BFDIA released, and then from there they intercut. I think they released like the first half of BFB, and then from that point on, it's like they would intercut between releasing like a BFB episode, a Teapot episode, and then they would just keep on going back and forth between those, and then eventually they also started releasing BFDIA, and then at some point they also included BFDIE, which is the next season that I'm going to probably review. So I'm going to probably review BFDIE because Teapot is still airing, and BFDIE actually concluded, even though I think it might take place... No, like it's technically, I think BFDIE is considered season 6, but I'm going to review it before season 5, which is Teapot, because Teapot is still airing and season 6 is done, and season 6, I'm pretty sure it's like a side story of the like events that happen that are not related to the main plot. So anyway, overall the plot, I'm just going to give probably I'm going to go an 8.5 for like just the ability. I think I gave it a 9 in the last review for BFDIA, but I think that just for the fact that this one, I think there's a bit less details that they utilize, where it felt like in BFDIA it was like, I don't know, it felt like the fact that I guess all the characters were involved, they were able to utilize it. I don't know, it felt, I don't know, just in this case, it does, maybe it's wearing off the amazement a bit, but even so, I still think that it's amazing that the way that they're able to just recall all these details that happened years ago and still make such, it's like extremely impressive, the writing of this series. It's like One Piece, except One Piece is still kind of structured in a pretty straightforward way, where it's like all the events, it's like you can pretty easily remember them, but this show, for how chaotic and random and hectic it is, the way that they're able to remember so many details, it is just extremely impressive, I would say. So yeah, maybe I'm being a bit harsh by giving it just an 8.5, but I'm being harsh with it, I'm going to say. So yeah, that is all these scores. So I'm going to do the calculations. So King Crimson. All right, so it ends up coming out to exactly a 6.5, which would be good. And I think I'd probably give it that. I would probably say it is good. And I think I gave also BFDI and BFDIA, I think a 6.5. Maybe I gave one of them a 7. Or maybe actually both of them I gave a 7. I'm going to say this series is a bit worse than both BFDI and BFDIA, but even so, it's still a good series, I'm going to say. So I'm going to call it a 6.5. Looking forward to, I have now two seasons left, which is BFDIE, and then Teapot, which is still airing, so that's going to be fun to review those. But in the meantime, I'm just going to give this one a 6.5. I'm going to say good season, and yeah, that is pretty much all there is to it. So if you have any recommendations, any shows, movies, video game stories, anime, manga, web series, anything that you want me to review, leave it in the comments, and I will maybe possibly check it out. With that said, that is pretty much all there is to it, so let's leave it at that.